You don't need this crazy, interesting life story, some insane skill, or to be this expert guru in order to blow up on YouTube in 2026. And I know this because when I first started my channel, I really was not anyone special. I was just a normal girl from a Southeast Asian country that most people have never even heard of, working a normal corporate job in banking. But then one day I picked up a camera, and 2 years later, I'm doing work that I genuinely love full-time, running a business I built from my content, and also traveling the world whilst doing it. And so you might be thinking to yourself, like, how are normal people doing this? And how are they thriving on social media in 2026? The truth is that in recent years, especially, the social media landscape has changed so much. So it's not about being extraordinary anymore. It's about understanding this new landscape, understanding what people actually want to consume these days, and then riding that wave. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what small channels should focus on in 2026 to not only grow fast, but to also build a genuinely engaged community, how to find your slightly different edge so that you can stand out, and how to build trust and authority, even if you're not an expert yet. So without further ado, let's dive into it. The first thing I wanted to mention is that you only really need to be slightly different. When I first started making content, I used to make a lot of self-improvement, productivity videos, and eventually I pivoted more into content creation and business. Now, there are a ton of people making this sort of content, and you can probably think of a few off the top of your head. But what I realized is that, especially for YouTube growth channels and for business channels, they're very male dominated. And so there's a lot of people that have this, more masculine energy and are a bit more hustle grind and have that sort of mentality. And where I differentiate myself amongst those people is the fact that I bring a more feminine energy to the space. Like, so many people, like my viewers, tell me that I bring a more calming presence. I'm more of like a comforting creator, someone who's a bit more compassionate when I teach about these topics. So now I really lean into that. And in fact, it's one of the main reasons for why people end up becoming my clients. And like when I ask them what made you want to work with me, a lot of them have said that, I really like how you teach. It's not in like the hustle grind masculine way, but rather in a more comforting, more grounded, more feminine way. And that was what made me stand out in their eyes, which was honestly very interesting to find out. And I never knew that this was my edge or like my superpower, if you will, until very recently, like in the past year when I started my business. But before that, I've been making content for 2+ years now, and it just never clocked to me that, this is something that is unique about my content. The point that I'm trying to make is that you just need to be slightly different. Now, everyone has their unique edge, and where most people get this wrong is that they feel like they need to have this secret sauce or wow factor that's like super out there and like this big crazy thing that's meant to stop people in their tracks, but that's really like not necessary at all. You just need to highlight one or a few key things about you that are just slightly different, and it can be really subtle things, but it just needs to be clear. So there are a few practical ways that you can find your unique edge. The first way I'd recommend is talking to people that you know, like your friends and family, people you know in real life, and just ask them things like, how would you describe me in 3 words? Or, what's a defining personality trait that I have? What do you think makes me stand out? Ask those same people as well, what do they think about your channel and what makes your content interesting or unique? Like, what do they like about your content? Another thing you can do, and this is something that I would highly, highly, highly recommend to any creator out there, is to actually speak to your audience members. Ask them, like, what drew you to my content? Like, what do you like about my videos? What do you like about me as a creator? And if you've got a business from your channel, ask your clients, what eventually made you want to work with me? Like, what was that defining moment that helped you to make that decision? And finally, you can also reflect on all of these questions yourself, like have a little journaling sesh where you reflect on, what you think makes you different from other people, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what are your defining experiences in life that make you unique. And after gathering all of this data and feedback from all these different sources, you can then start to look at the answers and start to pick out maybe a few that keep cropping up again and again, and commonalities between those answers. And that's eventually going to be your secret sauce or your unique edge. And by the way, if you're an educational YouTuber and you really want to grow your channel and eventually turn it into a sustainable income source, I recently revamped and relaunched my Creator Accelerator program. It's basically designed to help you do exactly that, and you can find out more and apply if it feels right for you in the link in the description below. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is how to be seen as an authority and have credibility when you're not an expert or you're still in the building phase. So when you're trying to build a business from your channel, or you want to be someone who is worth following on social media, then you do need to have a certain level of credibility. But for the longest time, time, and this is something that I was very mistaken about, is that I thought that having credibility meant that I needed to be this expert or this guru, someone who is perfect and never makes any mistakes and has all of the right answers and is this infallible character. With my content, especially in the early days, I was so scared to share anything that would make it seem like I didn't know what I was talking about, or that I made any mistakes and I was imperfect in any way. Especially because when I first started my YouTube channel, I was posting a lot of self-improvement and productivity content. So if you look back on my channel and my older videos, you'll see that I've pivoted quite a bit. And especially with that niche, self-improvement and productivity, you definitely feel this pressure to not be seen as someone who doesn't have it all together. Because, if you're teaching me about productivity, then why should I listen to you if you yourself are not a productive person? Or if you're going to be teaching me about mindset, then why should I listen to you if you yourself are like, you don't have a good mindset, or you're not in a good space, or you don't have control over your mind or your emotions or whatever. But over time, because I've been making content for over 2 years now, the funniest thing is, and this is so ironic, the moment that I started to share more of my mistakes, more of my self-doubt, and the less glamorous parts of my journey of, building my channel and also building my business, that's usually when I would have the best engagement on my content. And it's usually those content pieces that would help me to eventually get clients down the line. People would actually reply to my newsletter articles and say how, what I talked about really resonated with them. And just to illustrate this point, like I had 2 newsletter articles where I was talking about, the less sexy parts of my business journey. And one of them was titled "A Very Honest Update on My Business." The second was "My Hardest Lesson in Business and Life." And those articles got twice the number of clicks on my CTA versus my average number of clicks for all of my newsletter articles. And in this case, the CTA was linked to my coaching offer and my landing page. So, that just goes to show that when people can resonate with your content and can really emotionally connect with it, that's when they will begin to trust you more and actually want to see what you have to offer. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you don't need to be this expert or guru character in order to have credibility online, especially within recent years. Like now there's this massive wave on social media of creators who are documenting the journey or are still in the building phase. And people are becoming more and more drawn to these kind of creators, whereas previously, most people would only believe and follow those experts or those gurus with like 10+ years of experience in this field, or maybe a bunch of certifications and qualifications in this area. But honestly, like now that's just not true anymore. People love those creators who are still on a journey and who are still building, because people love a good narrative. They love following a good story. It's like following a fun plot in a TV show. Authority is not about perfection. It's about being just one or a few steps ahead and willing to share what you've learned. For example, if you've been gymming for a year or 2 years, then you are an authority to someone who has never set foot in the gym before and who is just at the start of their fitness journey. If you're someone who has made their first $1,000 online, then you are an authority to someone who has no clue about business whatsoever. If you've been making YouTube videos consistently for 6 months, then you are an authority to someone who has never picked up a camera in their life. And so please don't discredit yourself. Like I know this is a huge mental barrier for a lot of creators out there, especially smaller creators who are still like in the building phase. You know way more than you think, and you have more right to talk about your learned interests and your skills than you realize. We assume that people only ever want to hear from these experts or these gurus, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. And in fact, with my own channel and my own business, one of the most popular reasons for why people end up working with me as clients is because they say that I'm only 1 or 2 steps ahead of them. And that makes them feel so much more comfortable working with me versus someone who is, who has 1 million subscribers and who has made it in that sense. And the reason is because I was in their position not too long ago. And so the advantage of that is that I still remember all of the struggles and all of the problems that they went through. And I remember exactly how it felt like to go through those things. And I still remember what I did in order to overcome those obstacles. And so I'm in a much better position to teach them that versus someone who, has already made it and has been in the game for 10+ years and they don't even remember what it was like to start a YouTube channel. So, being 1 or 2 steps ahead actually does have its advantages. I wanted to round off this chapter by just giving some practical advice, if you will, on how you can actually implement this in your content, like how you can actually build credibility when you're still in the building phase. And one of the ways is that you can share your journey in real time. People trust someone who is honest about the process. So for example, content pieces could be, be day 100 of learning how to make YouTube videos. Week 6 of trying to save my first 100K. I posted once a week on YouTube for a year. Here's what happened. And this is something that I do quite a bit with my own content. So you'll see on my channel, I do have vlogs where I document my journey of quitting my 9 to 5, and I do 6-month checkpoints. So 6 months after quitting my job, a year after quitting my job. And the style of it is very different to my usual talking head educational content. And often I'm just going on a solo date with you guys in town with my Osmo Pocket 3 and just yapping basically. And those content pieces usually tend to do very well, and those get a lot of engagement. So that's one way you can do that. The second way is to become the person who did the homework. For example, I wrote 1,000 subject lines to understand what makes people click. I tested 12 different content formats. Here's what got the most views. I spent 6 weeks testing every AI tool for content creation so you don't have to. Third way is to become the bridge. So whilst you don't necessarily have to be the guru, you can just be that bridge between where they are, like where your audience is at, and where the experts are at. So examples of content could be, I asked 50 successful entrepreneurs their #1 business mistake, and here's what I learned. I read 30 books about how to get rich. These are the 5 that always crop up. I analyzed 100 viral reels. Here's what they all have in common. The third piece is on authenticity. This is all about being real about how you feel and sharing the less glamorous, less perfect sides of you, standing firm on the strong opinions that you might have, even if, and especially if, they're contrarian to what the typical person in your niche might say about a topic. For example, like what I shared previously, whenever I write newsletter articles or post YouTube videos where I am more vulnerable and I do share the ugly side of things, those are usually the content pieces that not only get the most amount of engagement, but also help me to eventually get paid clients down the line. And so the important point that I want to get across really is that authenticity builds trust with your audience, which is so key for business. People will not buy from you if they do not trust you and they do not trust your product. With business and personal branding, ultimately, you are just building trust at scale with your content. The way that you build trust is not by pretending to be this infallible character that is always perfect and always has all the right answers and never makes any mistakes, because that's just not real and it's not true. And people's bullshit radars are really sharp nowadays. Like, people can see right through it. Another point to consider as well is that it is extremely difficult to be vulnerable and to be very honest and open about your mistakes and your shortcomings, and to also admit your flaws and imperfections. And that is exactly why most people don't do it. And by doing so, you will automatically stand out amongst everyone else who's just pretending to be this perfect person. You don't need to be special or unique to be honest, but being honest makes you unique and special. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys did want more content on how to make better YouTube videos and grow your channel this year, I do have a video where I talk about how to make content better than 99% of people in 2026. You can check that out on the screen here. Okay guys, take care and see you in the next video.